Okay, hi. Welcome everyone. This is going to be our last session. Very, very important. We've been, in a sense, building up to this. What I would like to discuss today is the nature of the Torah. In the past, we talked about what the Torah is talking about. This is a little different. This is to help understand the nature of the relationship between God and the Torah. You could say the traditional view, or the popular traditional view, is that the Torah is an expression of God's will. So we're going to see that from the sources that we're going to look at, starting actually from the Ramban, we'll see that that's not necessarily so, and then the question really remains or becomes, what is the relationship between God, God's will, and the Torah? So let's begin. The first source that we have here is the Ramban ala Torah. This is a small one line out of his long introduction, and he says as follows. What's bothering him here actually is why Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah doesn't start with Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moshe saying, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. But rather it starts with the narrative, and Moshe Rabbeinu enters the narrative at the correct historical time. Okay? So he says the Torah shekadma lebriyat ha'olam, the Torah preceded the creation of the world. Ein sarich lomar leleidato shel Moshe Rabbeinu k'mo sheba lanu b'Kabbalah sh'ayta ktuva be'esh shchora al gabe esh levana. So therefore, since the Torah preceded the world, so it obviously precedes the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Torah doesn't tell us about the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu before the initial narrative of Bereshit. And here's the part that I want to focus on. Shahita Moshe balanu b'Kabbalah, as the tradition teaches us. Shahita tuva be'esh chora al gabe esh levana. The Torah was written black fire upon white fire. So clearly the Torah that we're talking about, this what you call this Torah K'duma, this primordial Torah, which doesn't have regular physical letters, is something which has infinite potentiality. That's how I think the best way to say it. And this is borne out by other parts of the Ramban's introduction when he says that the way the Torah is divided, namely into the letters and the words and the psukim and the parshiot, that is the Torah that we have. But the Torah K'duma, the primordial Torah, there are no such divisions, and there are many other possibilities, other ways of reading the Torah. So in a sense, the primordial Torah, or the Torah K'duma, is a Torah of infinite possibilities, and the way we have it, the way we read it, is one of infinite possibilities. And that means whenever you choose a reading, or talk about, for example, translating something, whenever you translate or you choose a reading, you're choosing one reading and you're setting aside other possible readings. So that, and this is the key term, that in a sense is a tzimtzum. That is a narrowing down for the sake of understanding. You narrow down the meaning and you're setting aside other possible meanings for whatever reason in terms of the context that you're interested in, the ideas that you're willing to convey. Right? Every translator, when he comes to an original text, right, there may be different ways of understanding the nuance of the text, but he chooses one and he sets aside another. So that's what we mean when we say something gets lost in translation, and that's a tzimtzum. So that our Torah, therefore, and this is very important to realize this, we'll see this in the coming sources, our Torah in that sense is a tzimtzum. It is a limitation, a delimitation of infinite divine potential of infinite possible revelations. So let's see the next source. This is from the Ma'orei Naim, Reb Nachum Chernobler, a disciple of the Magidi Mezrich. He says as follows: Shehu Yitbarach Ein Sof Ve'ein ha'olamot yicholim l'sovlo. God's presence cannot be suffered by the physical world. It's too much. It would be sensory overload. Think of Ma'amad Har Sinai that we read in Shul just a few weeks ago, when the people run away from Har Sinai and they run to Moshe and they say, you speak to us because we can't bear God's revelation. Ein ha'olamot yicholim l'sovlo. Mikol makom, machmat shehu yitbarach ratza b'briatam. In a sense, God is stuck in between a rock and a hard place. If he wants to create another in order to have a relationship, but the moment he reveals himself to have that relationship, the other one evaporates by virtue of the power of his presence. So what does he have to do? Of course, the first action, we talked about this when we talked about the Tzimtzum, the first act of creation is actually self-limitation. Shehu yitbarach ratza b'briatam. Tzimtzem et atzmo ba'olamot kiviyachol. Right, he limited himself within the worlds, so to speak. Why does he say so to speak? This goes back to the machloket that we saw, when we mentioned in the Balatanya, and that Hassidut in general seems to hold by this opinion, is that the tzimtzum of the Arizal is understood to be shelo kipshuto. Because to say that the tzimtzum is kipshuto, that there really is space in which there is no God, that would be a dualistic reality. And since that's impossible in their minds, the tzimtzum is only from our limited human perspective, and God created that perspective for us, right? So that's what he means when he says kiviyachol, so to speak. So tzimtzem et atzmo ba'olamot kiviyachol, b'chdei sheyuchlu ha'olamot l'sovlo, in order that the world should be able to suffer his presence. U'b'china zo nikra Elohim. Right? That aspect of God's revelation is called Elohim, not Havaya. Right? The Shem Havaya, the God's proper name, is something which is a presence which we cannot bear. Elohim is a lavush, and we talked about lavushim also. Elohim is a lavush for Havaya. Ach, mahut ha-tzimtzum, what is the essence of the tzimtzum? This is key for us, and this is our subject. Hu ha-Torah. The Torah is the vessel which contains which is the vessel which is mitzamtzem. It is the boundaries or the lavush of God's presence. Tzimtzem shchinato ba'otiyot ha-Torah. So God, the infinite God, whose presence cannot be suffered, is hidden inside the letters of the Torah. So the Torah both obscures God's revelation and reveals God's revelation. So that is the role of a lavush. So God is able to reveal himself through the Torah being a lavush, not God himself, okay, but rather a lavush, a projection of God in the world, which is necessarily one possibility out of many. Okay? Now let's, in order to elaborate upon this, I think the best way to do that is to learn a parsha, which, parsha in Parshat Mishpatim, which through the learning of that parsha, we'll see how this Torah expresses itself even in the pshat of the psukim. I always come back to what Kissinger said, that regarding international relations, he says sometimes an argument has the additional virtue of being true. So sometimes an argument or a Hasidic pshat has the additional virtue of actually being there in pshat in the psukim. So let's take a look. Okay, so this is Parshat Mishpatim. Okay, we just read it. Okay, so let's start with the midrash. Okay, ve'ele hamishpatim vayihi bayom hashlishi biyot haboker. Okay, but this is referring to Matan Torah. Baboker nitna haTorah u'ba'erev nitnu hamishpatim. The Torah was given in the morning, and the mishpatim were given in the evening. Okay. Now, what is that? What's the significance of that? Obviously, the Midrash is not interested to tell us what time of day it was per se. The Boker and the Erev symbolize something. Okay. Okay. So now let's take a look at the psukim in the end of Parashat Mishpatim. Okay. Vayavo Moshe vayisaper la'am et kol divrei Hashem ve'et kol hamishpatim. Vayan kol ha'am kol echad vayomru kol hadvarim asher diber Hashem na'aseh. It doesn't say na'aseh v'nishma. Okay. Then I'm continuing to read. Vayichtov Moshe et kol divrei Hashem vayashkem baboker vayiven mizbeach tachat hahar ו12 מצבה ל12 שבטי ישראל, etc. ויקח ספר הברית ויקרא באוזני העם ויאמרו כל אשר דיבר השם נעשה ונשמע. Okay? So this is very interesting. In Pasuk Gimel, it says only na'aseh. The people's reaction is na'aseh. The famous reaction of na'aseh v'nishma is only mentioned in Pasuk Zay. Okay? So what is that about? Okay? I want to point something else out. We're, in a sense, we're so biased when you think of Ma'amad Har Sinai, we have to remember that there's no indication at all in Parshat Yitro that anything is being written down. Everything there is Ba'al Peh. Elohim yidaber, Moshe yidaber, ve'Elohim ya'anenu b'kol. Moshe speaks, God responds. Everything is verbal, is oral. There's nothing written down. The very first time that anything written down is mentioned is right here in Pasuk Dalet. Vayichtov Moshe kol divrei Hashem. In Pasuk Gimel, it's still verbal. Vayavo Moshe vayisaper la'am et divrei Hashem. That would be Aseret HaDibrot. Ve'et kol HaMishpatim. That would be Parshat Mishpatim. Right? And the people say na'aseh. Then Pasuk Daled vayichtov Moshe. This is the first time anything written is being written down. The reason I said we're so biased, when I still have little kids, so we watched the movie The Ten Commandments every Chol Moed Pesach. So I've seen it quite a few times already. But we're so biased by Charlton Heston holding the Shnei Luchot HaBrit at Ma'amad Har Sinai. There were no Shnei Luchot HaBrit at Ma'amad Har Sinai. There was nothing written at Ma'amad Har Sinai. This is the first time anything written is being mentioned. And then you skip down to Pasuk Zayin, what's being written is suddenly a book. Vayikach Sefer HaBrit, Vayikra Bo'oznei Ha'am, Vayomru Kol Asher Diber Hashem Na'aseh V'nishma. So we have two things here, namely Na'aseh, and then only later Na'aseh V'nishma. Why is that? And we have, for the first time in Pasuk Daled, the first time that anything about anything being written is mentioned. So the Beit Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov Leiner, who was the son of the Meir Shiloh, thinks these two things are connected. Okay, let's see this piece. Okay, just scroll down for a second. Hold on, I just need to scroll down. Okay. So we have as follows. V'rak ba'erev nitnu hamishpatim. The Mishpatim were given in the evening. Hainu, achar shenistam mehem hitgalut haor shaya mefurash lifnehem, when the light was taken away, right? When the sun set, what was the light? The light was the light of Parshat Yitro, of Aseret HaDibrot. Then they saw clearly shekol ha'esek shelahem hu rak im Hashem yitbarach. They saw that basically ein od milvado. That they had a different level of consciousness where they saw God in everything. Hadoresh tovatam. Ve'elu hadibrot atzman. These Aseret HaDibrot nitlabshu belevushim, became enshrouded in garments. Ad olam ha'asiyah. Yatsa mizeh Parshat Mishpatim. So this is very interesting, and this is also Pshat. Parshat Mishpatim, he says, is the translation of Aseret HaDibrot. So the truth is, if you look in Parshat Mishpatim, you will find all of Aseret HaDibrot. For instance, the Ramban ala Torah, normative Judaism according to all opinions. Right? The Ramban ala Torah says that the reason Parshat Mishpatim starts with the laws of Eved Ivri is because because Anochi Hashem Lokecha Asher Hotzeticha Me'eretz Mitzrayim resonates in Eved Ivri, and the Dibur of Shabbat also resonates in Eved Ivri. So we have Aseret HaDibrot beginning in Parshat Mishpatim, and you will find the laws of Shabbat and the laws of Yom Tov, which are extensions of Shabbat, and the laws of Ritzicha, and the laws of stealing, and all the laws of damages, which are extensions of laws of stealing, and Shvuat Sheker for homework, right? Take a look in Parshat Mishpatim, read it carefully. You'll find all of Aseret HaDibrot at times even the same language, and the halachot which accompany the stealing and the killing in Parshat Mishpatim are extensions of Aseret HaDibrot. So he says, basically, that Parshat Mishpatim is the translation of Aseret HaDibrot. And that is Laila. That is after the sun set on the revelation of Har Sinai, the Aseret HaDibrot are translated into something that this world can suffer. Okay? Yatsa mizeh Parshat Mishpatim, sheyesh lahem, what do we have in Parshat Mishpatim? Ta'anot utviyot ze al ze. Right? People all of a sudden are fighting. Bidvarim gashmiyim, on physical things. In Har Sinai, the Gemara in Shabbat says that the venom of the Nachash was removed from them. Okay? And now all of a sudden you're in Parshat Mishpatim and people are, and you have Shnayim Ochse B'Talit in a sense, two people fighting over things. V'haya kashe alehem ma'od lekabel Parshat Mishpatim. Parshat Mishpatim, it could be very nice to meditate, right? But it's hard to learn Maseches Bava Metzia and Bava Kama. Haya kashe ma'od lekabel alehem Parshat Mishpatim. Ki kama kitrugim מתעוררים בין בני אדם, עד היכן שנמצא לפעמים שמותר לאדם לשנוא לחברו. Sometimes it's even permissible, right? The level of conflicts which arise is permissible for one person to hate someone else, ולהפסידו ממון, and to cause them to lose money. וזהו, and that's what the Midrash means when it says, בערב ניתנו המשפטים, היינו בחושך ובהסתר פנים. This is really something. He's saying that basically, Masechet Bava Kama, Masechet Bava Metzia, Masechet Bava Batra, Masechet Sanhedrin, they're in a sense bachoshech ubehester panim. He's saying that Parshat Mishpatim is a tzimtzum of Parshat Yitro. It is a translation and therefore a limitation of possibilities and a distancing from God. Okay, let's see. V'zehu, now he's going to go back to Pshat in the Psukim above that we have here. Okay? V'zehu shemitchila ne'emar Vayavo Moshe vayisaper la'am et kol divrei Hashem ve'et kol hamishpatim. Vayomru kol asher diber Hashem na'aseh. And that's why it says that Moshe came and told the people, right? And the people responded with na'aseh. Ve'acharei zeh ne'emar. And only after that it says, Vayichtov Moshe et kol divrei Hashem, Vayikra ba'oznei ha'am. Then Moshe wrote the Torah, and he read it to the people. Vayomru, and the people responded, Kol asher diber Hashem na'aseh v'nishma. Now he explains. Hainu, shektiva mora, writing down, indicates shel al divrei Torah nitlabshu b'levush. What did the Ma'orinaim say? The Ma'orinaim said that God was mitlabesh in the otiot of the Torah. That's what we saw above. Okay, so that's what he's saying now. Hainu shektiva mora shehadivrei Torah nitlabshu b'levush v'yardu le'olam hazeh lekach amru v'nishma. Why is that? Lishmoa ulahavin mipnei she'eh kasher alehem lekabel behester panim. V'kodem shenichtavu, but before the Torah was written, amru na'aseh afim lo nishma mipnei she'eh mefurash lifneihem avat Hashem yitbarach v'ra'u shekol ha'esek shelehem hu rak im Hashem yitbarach hadoresh tovatam. He's saying that vayisaper, when it's a verbal communication, it is direct. There's no time or need for contemplation. There's no need to let it sink in. It just hits. And therefore, there is na'aseh, which is sort of an automatic, reflexive response. There's no need to think about it. But what happens when something gets written down, the book becomes an intermediary. If I say I'm a good writer, right, and I write a poem or I write a book, I put myself into the book. I invest my kishkis, right, if it's really literature, right, and I put it in the book. And when you open the book, you can know something about me. But the book is an intermediary between the two of us. So in that sense, it's a tzimtzum, right? And it allows you to read about me somehow through what I've written. But the book is no longer the direct relationship. The book is there because the direct relationship is no longer there, right? So even though the book is in this reality of after the tzimtzum, in order to have any relationship, in a sense, you need the book because God himself could not be suffered in our consciousness. So the book, though, is a tzimtzum of God. It is, in a sense, the revelation in darkness, as opposed to what happened at Ma'amad Har Sinai, where the reaction is na'aseh, we just do it because it's an intuitive response. Whereas after the tzimtzum, after the book, now we have to search it out and understand it. So the book, the book doesn't jump out at you. It's like reading a book in a foreign language. Even if you know the language, it doesn't jump out at you. You have to look into it to understand it. And then when you understand it, then you know what to do. Okay? So that's the movement from Ma'amad Har Sinai to Parshat Mishpatim, where we really have is a tzimtzum, and he actually describes what we normally would think as a revelation of the divine light, in fact, is the tzimtzum itself, is the hester panim. In order to have the revelation at all, any sort of revelation, we need this hester panim, we need this levush. So what happens here is that the Torah, as we have it, has been, let's see how to put it, has been deflated somewhat in its significance. Okay? Whereas the, say, Nefesh HaChaim, right? And now you'll understand why the Litvaks would be so against this sort of Torah. The Nefesh HaChaim, for example, the Nefesh HaChaim states that the Torah originates really from a place which is before the Tzimtzum. And he talks about the Torah being Elokut Gamur. He talks about that in Shar Daled, the Shar that he talks about the Torah. Whereas here we're having a deflation of the primary nature of the Torah, where the Torah becomes a lavush, a necessary lavush, but a lavush of God's will rather than the will of God itself. Right? It's a translation. And as in all translations, sometimes things can get lost. Okay, so let's see. So first of all, we have a deflation, and we'll see that it may very well be that maybe sometimes it's even an obstacle, and that is a very big chidush. But let's see. Let's start with the midrash, okay? Because what we're about to hear is I think it's pretty revolutionary, but it's already in Chazal. It's in the midrash, and the Hasidim picked up on it. Okay, here's a midrash. The pasuk says, with regards to Yaakov, when he wakes up on Har Moriah, right? It says Vayikatz Yaakov Mishnato. Okay, so that's the pasuk. Yaakov awoke from his sleep. Okay, look at this drasha. Rabbi Yochanan Amar mi Mishnato. Vayomer achen yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh. Achen shchina shruya b'makom hazeh v'lo hayiti yodea. What does Rabbi Yochanan say? What did he wake up from? He woke up from his learning, mi Mishnato. And when he woke from his learning, I'm just doing pshat in the midrash. You can email me if you think that there's a different pshat in the midrash. That's fine. But what he seems to be saying is that Yaakov Avinu's realization that God is present, Vayomer achen yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh, achen shchina shruya b'makom hazeh v'lo hayiti yodea. God dwells in this place, and I didn't know. That realization, you could say that God consciousness, is only available to him when he awakes from his learning. And the implication of this midrash is that the learning of Yaakov Avinu was an obstacle in his ability to comprehend the presence of God. Okay? I think that's pshat in the midrash. Let's see the Ma'or Vashemesh. The Ma'or Vashemesh was Talmud of the Chernobyler, as well as I believe a Talmud of the Maggid. Okay, so he says as follows. He builds on this midrash. Vayachlom v'hinei. Vayachlom v'hinei. Vayikatz Yaakov mishnato. Vayomer achen yesh b'makom hazeh. Quotes the midrash. And he says, V'hu tamua, and this is a surprising midrash. Okay? V'nir'eh leva'er. Let's see what he does with this. Ki b'vadai al yidei esek haTorah l'shma, through the study of the Torah, yachol lavo l'kedusha gdola. Right? You can reach spiritual heights and sanctity through the study of the Torah. Kishe lomeid l'shma. Umidabek atzmo benafsho rucho v'nishmato ba'otiot HaTorah, when you cling to the letters of the Torah, because this is the lavush of God. Omnam afal pichen, nonetheless, lo yuchal lavo leikar hayirah v'ha'ava v'shtokukut la'avodato yitbarach. You cannot arrive at the ikar, right? At the primary spiritual heights the primary religious experience of yirah and ahava and desire to be close to God, to be Oved Hashem, through the Torah. That you can only do rak ayidei hatfilah b'misiut nefesh ubehitlavut. It has to do with your spiritual efforts, not the study of the Torah. Kayadua mikol asfarim hakadoshim umatzinu, and we find, this is Gemara Megillah, shenitman Yaakov beveit midrasho shel Shem ve'ever v'lamad Torah, that Yaakov, of course, was 14 years in the Beit Midrash of Shem ve'ever, and what did he do there? So he studied Torah, according to Chazal. Nimtza yada sod haTorah. He absorbed the meaning of the Torah. Omnam lo ba lehitgalut elokato yitbarach shemo ad ata. But he did not have experienced divine revelation until now. Shenitgala alav achar she'amad al sod hatfilah. Right? And it was through tefillah that he experiences the revelation, and that makes tefillah primary and Torah secondary. Okay? V'zeh perush hamidrash vayikatz Yaakov mishnato mimishnato. Rotze lomar mitorato shenitorer al yidei atfilah hazot ve'evin shelo ba letachlit hasaga yidei haTorah l'chud. He's not casting away the Torah, don't misunderstand me, but it loses its primary status as the instrument for achieving divine revelation. It may be a prerequisite, maybe, okay, but it is not the primary vehicle, and it alone it is insufficient. Okay? יוכל להבין יותר התגלות אלוקות ממה שהשיג עד עתה על ידי התורה לחוד. ואנוכי לא ידעתי סוד זה. And this is something he didn't know until that time. Okay? So what we have here is a different view of the Torah that we're used to. And the reason we're used to the traditional view, namely that the Torah is the ultimate revelation of God and a revelation of God's will exactly. We now have, because of the doctrine of the Tzimtzum, and we apply the doctrine of the Tzimtzum to the Torah, so the Torah itself is a narrowing of God's revelation, and that necessarily means that there's something beyond the Torah, that which in a sense got lost in translation. So that means there's more there than the Torah. Okay? Okay, let's see now, and the reason, of course, this might seem surprising to us, to those of us who are surprised by it, is because modern orthodoxy, I assume most of the people in the group here would characterize themselves as modern Orthodox, and for those who don't, I apologize. I don't mean it as a pejorative. The modern Orthodoxy was founded, in North America at least, by Litvaks. So the idea that the Torah is the ultimate revelation is something that that we received in our basic education, either directly from our Rebbeim or from our elementary school teachers and high school teachers who studied with the people who founded modern Orthodoxy in America. So that's why this is surprising. Let's continue here. Let's scroll down to what we have here from the Maggid. This is from the Maggid Mezrich. I hope you can see this. It's a little small. Let's see if I can make it larger. I hope that helps. Okay. I hope that helps a bit. Okay. This is from the Maggid Mezrich. Okay, let's, he's talking about when Avraham Avinu tells the Malachim that appear to him to hishanu tachat ha'etz, right, to rest themselves under the tree. Okay, let's see what he says about that. Hishanu tachat ha'etz. Okay? He says, Yesh lomar, al pi shene'emar ve'etz hachayim b'toch hagan. Okay. Remember, I said that a way of reading the Torah is that the stories repeat themselves in a circular fashion. So, of course, the tree that is in front of Avram Avinu's tent, which he asks the Malachim to rest themselves beneath, is, of course, the Eitz HaChaim. Okay, that should be obvious. Okay? All right. So he says the Eitz HaChaim b'toch hagan. This is the drasha. V'hinei Eitz HaChaim nikra Shem Havaya Kayadua. Right? Because the Eitz HaChaim is direct revelation. It's eternal life. It is being. That's the Shem Havaya, which, of course, after the Chait we do not have access to. Okay? So Eitz HaChaim nikra Shem Havaya Kayadua. Okay? Ve'omro b'toch hagan. Gan is nun gimel. Perush. Listen to this. This is great. Shehu mitlabesh b'tochiyut u'b'pnimiyut hagan. God enshrouds himself in the Gan. And what's the Gan? The Gan is Gan Parshiot Torah, the 53 Parshiot of the Torah. So the Shem Havaya is b'toch hagan. God is mitzumtzam and milubash in the Parshiot of the Torah. Okay? Kanizkar b'sefer Yetzirah. Sheshem Havaya hu mitlabesh umitpashet b'chol hadibrot v'ha'amirot. Okay? V'hinei yesh l'shem Havaya baruch hu kama v'kama levushim u'masachim. God reveals himself through many garments, through many different types of ways that he obscures himself. Okay? Ad ein ketz, ki mitchila u'mitlabesh b'toch, okay, hey motzaot hapeh. Right? That's the sounds, because he's talking about it as the way we would reveal our innermost thoughts. If you identify, and this goes back to us being created B'Tselem Elokim, you identify your innermost feelings, or that which is almost not even known to you as Ein Sof, and as the Sfirot, which are hidden, Chochmah Bina Dat, which is your internal world, and then you express it physically through your mouth, through the Hey Motzaot HaPeh, is the P, the N, the P, N, G, right? Those are the Motzaot HaPeh, and they turn into letters, right? These are all Levushim, right? This is what it means when we say that God is mitlabesh in the Otiyot, right? V'achakach b'tzerufim, and then the Otiyot become words, hanashemehen nasim tevot, v'achakach sipurim, and the words are woven into stories, okay? V'amru b'zohar, man de'itle einin, he who has eyes, he who understands, okay? Perush einei hasechel, in case you missed that, right? Einei hasechel, he who understands, he who sees, right? Hu mistakel b'pnimiyut hadvarim, person who understands, he understands that the words of the Torah are levushim, and I'll say only levushim, of an internal, deeper reality. So the person uses levush as a way of pointing them the way we use symbols, that symbols point us to a direction, right? So they look at the words and the stories to point them to something deeper. Avaman deletle einin, he who doesn't have understanding, who mistaker b'levush demalka, he looks at the levush and he says that's all there is. Right? It's the emperor's new clothes, but you're just looking at the clothes and there's no emperor, right? As opposed to looking at the emperor and not seeing the clothes. This is the exactly opposite, looking at the levush and confusing the levush with the melech himself, right? Ubesipurei gashmiut befrat, and that's what you think. You think the Torah is merely narratives, okay? This is why, I mean, many of even the best Torot that desire to uncover pshat, and we have psychological interpretations of various characters and economic explanations for various circumstances. When you think that's fine as a stepping stone, right? But if you think that that's all there is, right? So that's the Zohar. The Zohar condemns that. Okay. V'hinei yadua she'Avraham limeid l'chol be'olam. And right, so he taught everyone this, right? And he was trying to get the malachim, who he didn't know were malachim, he was trying to get them to understand this. And he said, let me just fix the camera for a second. Hold on one moment. Just one moment, something, you can see me, right? Hold on. Okay, just to fix this, give me a moment. Okay, that's better, right? So he's trying to teach the malachim this secret, and he says, Ramaz lahem, right? He says like this, Va'amar lahem, and he told them, yeah, Ba'asotchem eze mitzvah, if you do something good, right? Eze devar shebikdusha, right? Yeh kavanatchem el pnimiyut hadavar. Look at the internal reality. V'lo el hadavar kipshuto v'levusho. V'lezeh amar hishanu tachat ha'etz. Look beneath the tree. This is important. Shehu hachayut hu ha'ma'aveh u'mechayeh lekol hachayut asher al kein nikra eitz hachayim. Ki milat eitz hu lashon guf shel adam. Okay? So he's saying, don't look at the tree, look at that which is beneath the tree. Okay? And what's beneath the tree is the root. He's basically saying, don't look at the Torah, but look at the root of the Torah. Right? And the root is God himself. And that's what you have to look at. Okay? And that's, so again, we have this idea that the Torah is not ultimate. The Eitz HaChayim, right, is the Torah. But what Avraham Avinu instructs his disciples, his students, his followers, he instructs them that the Torah, the Eitz HaChayim, is not the ultimate, but look tachat ha'etz, look at what's behind it. Don't look at the narratives, don't look at the mitzvot as being ultimate. They may be indispensable, but they are not ultimate. What's ultimate is what is behind it. So even though you could say that we don't have access to the Ein Sof, and that was why the Tzimtzum was necessary, nonetheless, even though we don't have direct access, but we do have a sense of the way it resonates. It still resonates for us, and at times we can sense it. And we have to look for those moments. In any case, the Torah itself, as it appears to us, is not ultimate. Okay? Here, the next source is from Noam Elimelech. Here he really, he finally asks the question, right? If the goal of our being, in a sense, on earth, is to be close to God and to be Oved Hashem, so then what is the purpose of the Torah? Why don't we just meditate all day? V'hinei ikar ha'avodah. This is the Noam Elimelech. Sha'yidei sha'yado yitached shemo hu al yidei istaklut b'romut el yitbarach v'gdulato, right, is to contemplate God. B'mora b'pachad haba la'adam memela b'istakluto norotav niflotav. Right, you have to meditate and contemplate God, and from that you will have an experience of awe and simcha as well. Okay? V'im tomar, finally, he asks the question, Lama natan Hashem yitbarach kol taryag mitzvot la'asok b'hem? See, a Litvak would never ask that question. right? Now, he's sensing that if the Torah is a lavush and an approximation of God, but not God himself, and the human quest has to go all the way to God, so then what is in fact the function of the Torah? So what we would say, right, the simplest thing to say, I suppose, is that it's a necessary instrument in order to get there. That's not what he says. This is very interesting. He says, "Ach im haya ha'adam mistakel b'romamuto tamid b'li hefsek." If a person would continuously contemplate God, haya batel mehamitziut mehamora v'fachad ura'ada haba la'adam ha'idei zeh. The person would cease to be. Think of what Rudolf Otto calls the sense of creatureliness in the idea of the holy. Right? He says when Avraham Avinu stands before God and he says, "Vanochi afar va'efer," right? The feeling of nothingness that arises in the face of what Otto called the mysterium tremendum, right? That terrible mystery. Right? So haya, that's what he's talking about here. Haya batel me'ametziut me'ha'ma'ura v'fachad ura'ada haba la'adam ha'yidei zeh. So then what's the function of the Torah? The function of the Torah is not what we would think to make God's revelation sufferable, but rather, listen, Lachein Hashem b'rachamav natan lanu tayag mitzvot shena'asok behem begufeinu la'avudato. He gave us physical commandments, v'hein to'elet la'adam, and they're useful for us, she'efshar l'kayem b'dveikuto yitbarach. L'kayem would be lehitkayem. So therefore we could still exist. The function of the Torah is as a counterweight to the spirituality. V'zeu vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz migurei aviv, migurei lashon vayagor moav. Yaakov dwelt in the space of fear. Right? Vayagor is lashon lo tagur mipnei ish. Right? Not to fear, or vayagor moav. Hanav shayalo yeshivav akava b'madrega zot tamid. He was always in fear and trembling. Liot b'rav afachad, yirat Hashem, aviv shebashamayim. Okay, what is Be'eretz Canaan? Be'eretz Canaan, Ratzon Lomar, al yidei shaya oved begufo, because Canaan is identified with physicality. Right? Shvu lachem poem hachamor, am hadomor lechamor. Chamor is lashon chomer, it's physicality. So the only way, he says, that Yaakov Avinu was able to survive the yirava fachad, the fear and the trembling in the presence of God, the noraut, right? Yaakov is nora, right? He's the attribute of Har'el gadol gibor va'nora. As Yaakov, nora, is because he had the counterbalance, he was anchored in the physical world. And the function of the Torah is to anchor us in the physical world so that when we stand before God, we don't evaporate. Okay? In the way, say, that Bnei Aharon evaporated. They didn't have the counterweight of the Torah. So the function of the Torah, the truth is, some people experience the study of halakha or the study of Gemara as an obstacle. So as an obstacle to spirituality. So what do we generally say to them? And I think there's a lot of truth to it. Is that spirituality doesn't have to be immediately rewarding, right? These are the stepping stones. You put the effort in, and then the spirituality comes, right? What he's saying here is it's true. If you sense it as an obstacle, it's true. It's because it is an obstacle. It is designed to hold you down on this world. It is designed to be a counterweight to your spiritual desires to be close to God and, in a sense, to lose yourself in God. Okay. There are two more pieces here, which are extremely important, from the Me'er Shiloach. Actually, three more pieces. Let's take a look here. I'm going to scroll down again. Okay. So we said that there's more to God, and there's more to God in the world than the Torah, which is on the one hand, an instrument of revelation, but on the other hand, an instrument of obscuring. I don't know if there's a word called obscuration. If there is, then that's the word I would use. If not, then forgive me. Okay. So there's a dissonance between the infinity of God and the Torah. Okay. Let's see the Mashilach. Okay, the Mashilach, in the Mashilach, he refined this idea and he expressed it very clearly. The first is Mashilach in Parshat Bechukotai. Okay, he says as follows. It says, Im Bechukotai telechu. Im hu lashon safek. If. Okay. V'hu ki af sha'adam holech b'divrei Torah. Person goes in the way of the Torah. In other words, the shomer halacha. You do exactly what it says in the Mishnah Berurah. So you think that you do what it says in the Mishnah Berurah, you feel you're safe, right? Where are you not safe? You're not safe when you're in the world of subjective religious experience and you don't know if it's real or not, and you don't know if you're hallucinating, and you don't know if it's just what the Rav calls somewhat of hedonistic psychological experience. You don't know that, right? But when you're in the Torah, right, when you're doing what you're supposed to do, there you feel secure, there you have certainty, okay? So the Me'er Shilach says this is totally not true, okay? Ki af sha'adam holech b'divrei Torah, sarich gam ken liot b'safek, he still has to experience uncertainty. Pen eino mekayem ritzon Hashem yitbarach b'shleimut. You can do exactly what it says in the Torah, but you still don't know if you're fulfilling God's will, because God's will, ki ritzon Hashem yitbarach, amok ma'od. Okay? The will of God is deep, and it's deeper than the Torah itself. Okay? So we have this dissonance between the halacha, what is called divrei Torah, and the will of God. Okay? Now this plays itself out, if you want to know how it plays itself out in the story, in the narrative, for him, for the Me'er Shilach, this is the relationship, there is a typology, right? There's a typological relationship between Yehuda and Yosef. And this is the relationship between what Yosef or Ephraim symbolize as opposed to Yehuda. Okay? He says as follows. This is the Me'er Shilach in Parshat Vayeshev. V'zeh shene'emar, Ephraim lo yikanet Yehuda, Yehuda lo yatzur et Ephraim. In the end of days, there'll be peace between Yehuda and Ephraim. Ki be'emet elu shnei hashvatim him tamid mitnagdim ze lezeh. What is the essence of Ephraim? Hu lahavino tamid, Ephraim always understands. This is a typology. You can't ask exactly why if it didn't work itself out this way in Jewish history. Okay, but he says ki Ephraim lahavino tamid b'chol davar ma'aseh adin b'halacha miblizan lazuz mimenu. Ephraim symbolizes adherence to the law without compromise. V'lachein, Ephraim, in a sense, is the Ish HaHalacha. Okay? V'lachein kishekatuv mazhirat Yisrael v'tiyechatau, right? When the pasuk wants to tell the Jews not to sin, they talk about Yosef, right? Pentitzach ke'esh beit Yosef. Yosef, Ephraim, is the enforcer because they're the ones that enforce the law. Okay? But what is Yehuda? The shorish ha'chaim shel Yehuda hu lahabit tamid l'Hashem yitbarach b'chol devar ma'aseh. Yehuda does not look to the law. Right? From Mechirat Yosef, till the story with Yehuda and Tamar, till his willingness to sacrifice everything and to take upon himself the responsibility for Binyamin, it was all, in a sense, in this way of looking at it, a neglect of the law. He looks to God, not to the law. Even though he sees what the law is, what the halacha is, nonetheless, he looks to God, which transcends the law. To show him the deeper truth. Right? That's what it means, dan din emet la'amito. There's din emet, that's according to the law. Emet la'amito is to somehow divine the deeper truth. Ki yuchal liyot af sha'adin emet. Right? But it still would be a miscarriage of justice. Right? And he goes on, skipping a little bit. It says, Rak sha'Hashem yitbarach ya'ir lo mechadash ritzono yitbarach. There's no relying on rules. It's direct revelation. V'ha'inyan, and in case you missed the implications here, he says, V'ha'inyan hazeh yichayev lif'amim la'asot ma'aseh neged halacha, ke'et la'asot l'Hashem v'chulei heferu toratecha. Because the divine will transcends the law, and the function of the law is only to estimate God's will when you do not have access, direct access to God's will. But there is something, because the halacha is a tzimtzum, the book, the words is a tzimtzum of God's will. We know there's something beyond God's will, which is ascertainable in extreme times. Now the Mashaloch, we're not into the history of the Mashaloch. The Mashaloch, there's no documentation at all that he ever acted on anything. But this is a very, very important idea, and I think it has ramifications for today. Namely, the Mashaloch would say, right, that if a person experiences an internal conviction which approaches certainty, which at moments he may actually experience as certainty, that if the person is refined, okay, that may give him license to act on that, even though it is against the halacha. Okay? Not on a regular basis, but there may be extreme cases where that would be justified. Okay? And this calls into question what we call the eternity of the Torah. So let's see the next and last piece of the Mashaloch. Okay. So we have as follows. This is from Parshat Matot. Here he talks about das Paklaria HaMe'ira and das Paklaria She'ena Me'ira. Right? The Gemara says in a number of places that Moshe Rabbeinu was different than the other prophets, that Moshe Rabbeinu's experience of revelation was, quote-unquote, through the Aspaklaria HaMe'ira, through, how shall we translate it, a radiant speculum, whatever that means, okay, as opposed to the Shara Nevi'im, Shnitnabu v'Aspaklaria She'ena Me'ira. Their vision was less clear, okay? So that generally is interpreted to mean that Moshe Rabbeinu had access to the eternal, unchanging reality, and that's why the Torah that Moshe revealed is fundamentally unchanging, open to interpretation, right? But it's fundamentally unchanging, chiseled in stone, figuratively and literally, as opposed to the Nevuah, the prophecy of the prophets, which is more approximate, okay? Which gets filtered through their personalities, okay? Let's see what the Mashaloch says about this. Vaydaber Moshe Roshei Matot says, referring to the laws of Nidarim. He quotes a Sifrei. Kol Nevi'im nitnabu b'ko. All the prophets, when they prophesy, they say ko, which is an approximation. Ko amar Hashem. Thus, an approximation. Hosif alei Moshe shenitnabei b'zeh hadavar. Moshe Rabbeinu has clarity. Okay, nothing new. Okay? V'davar zeh, that clarity, lo haya noheg elo b'dor hazeh. That clarity was only existed in the desert. Okay, now, here's where he does the switch. V'hu, ki kol ha'nevi'im haya shlichutam liYisrael b'ma'amar nevuatam, kefi ha'et va'azman, ukefi koach hasagatam ken nitnab'u. All the prophets prophesied according to what the needs of the time and their subjective ability to comprehend God's revelation. Now, that's fine until now. Part of their limitation is v'ala beruach nevuatam, and they think as a consequence of their prophecy, asher dvar nevuah Allah yeh kayam le'olmei ad. They are under the misimpression that their prophecy is eternal. Ach be'emet nimtza shinuyim kefi erech dor vador. But in fact, the prophecy is limited by circumstances. Okay? But they don't understand that. That is the ispaklaria she'einana me'ira. That is the unclear aspect of their revelation, is they do not understand the context of their revelation. What did Moshe Rabbeinu see and understand that they didn't understand? What was his clarity? He understood that everything that he was perceiving was for that moment. Umikomo. He understood the impermanent and temporary nature of prophecy. This is the prophecy of the Torah that he's talking about. Ulacharzman, and in a different time, God will desire something else. So the clarity of Moshe Rabbeinu is that he transcends the law, that he understands that the rules are approximations, but there's something beyond the law, namely the divine will, which is not given to the symptom, to the limitation of rules, but every moment is a different revelation, a different divine will. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who understands that. Okay? Now, this approach of how we understand the aspaklaria and how we understand the nature of the Torah and the nature of halakha as an approximation and a tzimtzum, and at times maybe even an obstacle to spirituality. It's a tzimtzum of God's will, of God's presence. It is a levush, an expression which is a translation of God, but not God himself, not the way the Nefesh HaChaim says that the Torah is elokut gamur, but rather a levush. This opens us up, right? If we talk about the basic assumptions of the previous sessions that we did together, that the understandings that we have, the sensibilities that we've developed, the intuitions that we feel very deeply, coming from refined human beings, it's not simple, can bring about very severe changes in how halakha is practiced. Right? So when you talk about the relationship between men and women in the modern world, the ramifications of Jewish sovereignty in the state of Israel, how we relate to people who are different from us, how we relate to non-Jews, how we relate to people who are under our sovereignty. All those type of questions, when you look to the halakha, the way it was developed, may lead us to certain conclusions which we may feel very deeply uncomfortable with. Okay? So according to this approach, which goes back to the Baal Shem Tov and is very clearly developed here in the Mashiach, according to this approach, our feelings and our sensibilities have to be brought into the equation no less than the sugya and the tosafot and the ktsot hachoshen. Okay? Now that's something, of course, that needs to be worked out and needs to be worked out carefully. But the possibility of looking at halakha differently, looking at halakha as an expression and a lavush, but not as being ultimate, does lead to a great deal of more of flexibility. And I think the most important thing that emerges from this approach is that it vindicates and also gives very significant meaning to our intuitive sense and faculty of what we believe is right and what needs to be done under unique circumstances. Okay, I want to thank everyone for joining us in these sessions. I'd like to ask everyone who got the survey to please get it back to me. I'd really appreciate it. I really need your input because Beit Midrash Har'el wants to continue producing educational material, webinars, materials that you would find helpful. So please get those surveys to me. I realize everybody's busy, but please try to do that. And thank you very much, and I'll keep